Well, now that you may be able to visit Cuba, what Cuba are you really seeing? Is Cuba what we think it is? Let's find out from someone who lived and escaped. The word is escaped from Cuba. Mailyn, thank you. I'm going to try your last name, Salabarria. How did I do?
Pretty close.
All right, give me the best one.
Salabarria.
Barria. All right, I'll try. You very proudly say you escaped Cuba. Why do you use that term, escaped? Did you just, you live here now?
Yeah, I am an American by choice for the past 16 years. And yes, I always say that I escaped Cuba because back in 2001, when I left, you even still had to request authorization from the government to leave the island and pay for it. It was not that those uppity slaves could leave anytime they wanted. So yeah, I did escape.
You just didn't go to Mexico anytime you wanted to have a nice vacation?
No, I used an alternate route that, kind of like led me here.
And you're also careful about letting people know how you escaped because you still have family there.
We are. I mean, we still have family there, and I think every Cuban American that still have family there is always, you always have that fear inside you that, yes, I don't need to self-censor myself anymore, but I also have to think about the ones that I left behind, because unfortunately, you still have family there and you don't know what they're going to do to them.
What you say can affect them.
Exactly, yes.
All right, why did you want to escape?
I think that I always had this internal gut feeling, if you call it, that there was a life in freedom outside the island. In my case, I was born and raised under Castro government. I was indoctrinated from kindergarten to all the way until I graduated from the Havana University under that system. But in my life, I went through an awakening process that led me to see things that couldn't quite match.
Well, first of all, let me ask you, you were raised and indoctrinated. How were you indoctrinated? What was the belief that they instilled in you through your education?
From being in elementary school and being taught to not have conversations, not being friends with other kids whose family may have escaped, from remembering in the 80s the Repudiations Act against the families and people that were trying to leave the island, from seeing even in high school how we were asked to watch and snitch and kind of like denounce with the school authorities if we knew of other classmates or friends that were going to church on the weekends.
To
church, yes.
You were supposed to tell your teachers
yes,
of which kids were going to church.
If you heard about it, your student record all the way from kindergarten to the university in Cuba had boxes where you have to mark whether your parents were associated to the Communist Party, whether you would hear conversations against Castro in your house, whether the women were associated with the Federation of Women and that kind of thing. That's the Cuba I grew up.
So they want to know what you're talking about at your kitchen table. They want to know if your parents are talking.
Of course.
You say of course, but I don't think people here would say of course because that's so crazy to us.
Isn't it? It's like a movie completely out of this world. Right. But yes, the reality is that I grew up in a Cuba where you could go to jail if you have a Christmas tree in your house before the Pope visit the island. That's the society I come from. That's the society, my generation, and obviously the ones that came after me, we were told to have these two-faced survival skills where what you talk in your kitchen table and your opinions and your views that you share with your really, really close circle of trust is not the one that you're talking about in your school, in your classroom, or in your employment place.
So what I do, where the way I speak here and on radio and whatever is exactly how I talk at home. That doesn't happen. So in other words, there's a way you can talk to people you trust, but you want to make sure that they don't tell the authorities.
Exactly. And I have a perfect example for you. When I first came to the United States in Miami, I lived in Miami for about 3 years and a half. I remember at the very beginning, and if you have the opportunity to talk to any other Cuban, ask them, and you'll probably hear the same story. You start talking about politics, and you start talking about Fidel Castro, and all of a sudden your voice starts to go down.
Really?
And then you start whispering, and then you have that cousin and that friend that has been here probably for 20 years start joking with you and say, hey, you know what, you can go to the middle of the street and say down with Fidel Castro and nobody can do anything to you.
You said that you had an awakening. So if you're raised this way, what awakening do you have? I mean, what materials did you get? What, were people dropping the Federalist Papers down and an
No.
Ayn Rand book down and go, wait a second, this is wrong? How do you get any idea?
No. I mean, the first book that I read in 2001 when I left Cuba was Animal Farm.
Really?
Because obviously it's a censor book in Cuba.
You can't get it.
I never heard about it before.
You're kidding.
Until I read it.
One of the most classic anti-communist books.
The person who gave me the book, she was like, she told me, this is like a fantasy fiction novel. I want you to read it, and then I want you to tell me what you think. And, it's a small book.
Yeah.
I read it pretty fast, and I just look ahead and I'm like, I can't believe this. It's like, we were in the farm. I was born in the farm. How someone could write a story like this? And then I asked her, was this person in Cuba? Were they, they live in the Soviet Union? Who wrote this? So that kind of awakening, obviously,
that was after you escaped.
That was
Tell
after
me about
I
what you
escaped.
did when you were in Cuba, living there, that said, I'm out of here. I'm finding a way out.
In my
How would you
personal
even know that
case,
you wanted it?
It was like a series of personal and events that happened in Cuba back then. After I got out of the high school and I started the law school in the University of Havana, was all those years where the Leon Gonzalez case happened. So
Right.
I was on the other side of the story in Cuba. It was when the Cuban Coast Guard, under the direct orders of Raúl Castro, they sank the 13th of March tugboat that had about 37 people trying to escape. And they drowned most of them, including 27 children. I worked in the restaurant right in the entrance of the Havana harbor where that took place. Right after that...
So did you know about it from the news, or did you know about it because of people coming through?
I saw it at the end of my shift.
Wow.
I talked to my coworkers in the next shift, and then I went to the news and I saw what happened, and then we have the state security visiting our workplace, telling us that what we saw was not really what we saw, that what we saw is what they were telling us that we saw that day.
From the state-run TV.
Exactly. So that happened. It happens, all this, what we call the maleconazo that happened in August while Clinton was the president, and what prompted that rafter crisis. Right. In those years, people took on the streets, and Castro put the army and the tanks out in the middle of the Malecon. So I saw all that, and at the very end of my career, before I graduated from law school, it was actually my mom, the one that told me, you need to get out of this country. And I was like what? I mean, I know that the society, everything was really, really like volatile, but I didn't have the money, the means, or anything like that. And it was my mom, the one that told me, I really don't want you to jump in a raft and risk your life, but I do know that you need to leave this country. And I went, Mom, why are you telling me that?
Because she remembers before.
And my mom was a teenager. So both my parents, my mom especially, they left Cuba before Castro took over. So she did have a comparison point that I didn't have.
All right, we don't have much time. So let me ask you a couple things. There is a thawing in relations now under Obama, and it's continuing. I largely support it because I think that if there's an exchange of thoughts and people, that people get to hear things, and I think it changes people's minds. People can go to Cuba now. What is it they should know when they go and visit Cuba?
I agree with you in part, in the sense that having that exchange with other people and other countries, the island is so isolated that it's going to, obviously, that person-to-person exchanges is going to bring something positive. The question that I always have for anybody that tells me that is, which Cuba are you planning to visit? Do you want to know the Cuba that I left, the one where I still have family there, or do you want to see the Cuba that Castro has been putting out for you to believe in the past 60 years? It's two parallel realities. So it basically depends on the person and what the person wants to see when they get there.
If you're going down there to hang out on the beach, it's going to be great. Or if you want to hang out in Havana for a while, it's great. But if you want to know what it's like to do, you've written a book called Made in Cuba, Born in the USA. Does this tell that story?
It's the topic, yeah, the stories that we try to do in the speeches and the presentations, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mailyn, thank you so much for being here. I wish we had a little bit more time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Listen for me on KHOW Radio, read me in the Denver Post, tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.